tech businesses booming or about to be?
The new center is going to be a milestone to allow us to grow tremendously.
What new manufacturing facilities mean for the region?
This really broadens the opportunity for us to both grow and attract technology companies.
And how to grow local startups without federal funding to mentor them. This is Metro Week. Hi, I'm Andrea Kelly. Thanks for joining us. We'll focus on the efforts to drive economic development through creation and retention of businesses here. That's after a look at the week's top stories from the Arizona Public Media Newsroom.
The U.S. Senate voted down a healthcare reform bill late Thursday night dubbed the skinny repeal. Senator John McCain was the key vote against the bill and said the Senate needs to get back to the regular process of passing legislation, which includes committee hearings and amendments. McCain said he voted no because the bill does not offer an appropriate replacement for the Affordable Care Act. The state's senior senator is now back in Arizona to begin radiation and chemotherapy for an aggressive form of brain cancer. His office says he plans to return to Washington at the end of the August recess. Governor Doug Ducey declared a state of emergency in Santa Cruz County after a sewer line that carries wastewater from Nogales, Arizona and Nogales, Mexico north to treatment facilities burst this week. The governor directed $200,000 to the Arizona Department of Emergency and Military Affairs to deal with the spill. Ducey is requesting help from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Southern Arizona's congressional representatives say federal help will be necessary to fix the international pipeline. And Tucson Mayor Jonathan Rothschild is confident the city won't lose grant funding from the Justice Department despite a crackdown on cities labeled as sanctuaries for undocumented immigrants. Earlier this week, Attorney General Jeff Sessions invited cities to apply for law enforcement grants. He said only cities that comply with federal law and allow immigration agents into their detention facilities would be eligible for the grants. For more on all of the week's top news, you can always visit our website. That address, news.azpm.org.
The town of Sahuarita is getting a $3 million grant from the U.S. Department of Commerce to build a new tech and manufacturing center. It will go by the acronym SAMTech. Who will use it? We paid a visit to the first two businesses set to move in once it's built.
I'm Anthony Mulligan. I'm CEO of Hydronolics. My wife Lynn and I started the company in 2009, and in 2010 we came up with this Emily invention. So with our co-inventor Bob Lautrup. So Emily stands for Emergency Integrated Life-Saving Lanyard. It's basically, think of it as Aladdin's magic rope. So it's a little miniature jet ski made out of Kevlar and advanced materials that takes a rope out to the person that's in trouble drowning. And she's very fast. She'll do 100 meters in 6 to 7 seconds. So as far as half a kilometer or so.
So where would this kind of technology be used? What kinds of places are buying it?
So initially we started with Emily systems for beaches. So when somebody's getting caught in a rip current, and then that's expanded now into the next stage. The country of Indonesia bought a large number of Emily's for tsunami response, and then for flash flood response. And now we have a new variant which focuses on floods and rescue floods. So we've been operating Emily's in Texas. So the Austin Fire Department has some places like Mississippi. And then here in Arizona, or in southern Arizona, we have 3 Emily systems for when the monsoon season comes. So imagine you're stuck on your car, the river's coming through. It can take a while for a rope team to set up to go and get the person in the car. Or they can attach a rope onto Emily with a life jacket and helmet, and it takes literally seconds. So on a river rescue, maybe 2 to 3 seconds to get a lifeline to the person on a car or a tree or stuck on the bridge.
So we're standing here in your company, which is at the southern end of Sahuarita. What parts get made here? What happens actually physically here?
So Emily is another project. Another aspect of this whole Emily project is she's almost entirely made in Arizona. So suppliers who were suppliers to me in previous businesses that I've had in Arizona produce almost all the components. So even when we designed her, our design was taking into account the skill sets of a fabric sewing operation in Tucson, the skill sets of machine operations in Tucson, The hull and deck, the Kevlar fiberglass components, are made by a company that I was a founder of years ago on the Tohono O'odham Reservation, and it's an interesting paradigm that we're completely made in the desert to rescue people in the oceans of the world.
So with the new Sahuarita Advanced Manufacturing and Technology Center, SAMTech, what will that enable your company to do that you can't do in this space here?
So the new center is going to be a milestone to allow us to grow tremendously. As you've noticed when you walked around, we've taken over the old courthouse, the old fire station, and the old police station. Not really the most ideal facilities for doing technology development and manufacturing. And we're sort of busting at the seams. So we actually are hiring more people, but we don't have a place to put them. We know we have more contracts for more expansion. And so in this center, what we're going to have is a much larger facility that we can move into and do things correctly, giving us the same advantage if we had chosen to be in Tucson proper, where there's lots of warehouse space available. The center also lets us have an impressive facility. So when high-ranking government officials come from the Middle East or they come from Europe or Asia, that they can feel comfortable if they give us a $5 or $10 million order that we're legitimate, and which is very important for us to go to our next level.
What would be the future of hydronaulics and the Emily if you didn't have that facility coming soon?
Well, when customers want to buy, the number one rule is you need to supply as fast as possible. So you always got to meet supply. Your supply always has to meet the demand. If you don't do that, you're going to lose your business in that window. So we would have no choice, but we would have to move somewhere else. So we would have to, the first thoughts would be we'd look seriously at Tucson, but then you also have to consider, should major operations or expansions be in port cities such as San Diego or Los Angeles? The timing of this facility could only be better if it was earlier. So it's actually a very instrumental key thing. So it's one of those times where all the pieces of the puzzle are coming together at the right time. So the facility, we can crowd things really tight knowing that that's going to happen. We can do some short-term expansions in other places. But if the facility weren't happening, we would undoubtedly, because of cost and time, we would have to do the bulk of our expansion somewhere else.
I'm Dan Crawford. I'm a majority owner of Control Vision. Control Vision was actually a Idaho corporation, started in 1986 as the Department of Energy spinoff. We do research and development for optical sensors in both space and industrial applications. Primarily, most of our money has been coming from space applications, so that's what we're pushing into. We work heavily with the College of Optical Sciences at university, which is another advantage to being here in the greater Tucson area. In 2007, I left working at Raytheon in Tucson because my wife is also a scientist. She just graduated from U of A and she got a job. So if I'm going to do something wild and crazy like grow a business, now's the time in my life to do it. So I did that in 2007 and spent 2007 to 2011 basically in my garage, and got the opportunity to move in with hydronaulics in 2011. And at the same time we started winning programs with the Air Force and Missile Defense Agency. And we've basically grown the company from 2 employees to 14 employees that we have right now, with our primary customers being the Missile Defense Agency and the Air Force.
And we're doing this interview in one of the hydronaulics office spaces because there's some security issues with yours.
Yeah, we have a number of projects going. We primarily build optical sensors for space applications for Missile Defense Agency and the Air Force. And right now we've got some manufacturing projects going, and it was too much of a security slash would kind of disrupt the flow of the work and the timelines we've got to meet our milestones. So we're doing this interview in the hydronaulic space, and I've been with Tony for a number of years, so I'm very comfortable with his boats.
And in fact, you're just on the other side of this wall is your company. So what's the value in being right next door with each other?
So I met Tony a number of years ago. Tony's had 7 businesses. I've had 1, And I've tried to learn as well as I could from Tony's mistakes. And so, you know, and some of them are just, you know, in the face of, you know, things not going right or wondering how you're going to make payroll next week, just the encouragement to keep going. It does take a long time to get these businesses off the ground. So that, in the very beginning, there was like 3 people in the office, and you know, when we were waiting for a FedEx package, it was nice to have hydronics employees and control vision employees in the same place, because you know, one of us you could still go to lunch, and usually someone would be there to get the FedEx package. And so you know, everything from that to you know, sometimes having you know, kind of engineering skill set or science skill set that you don't need full time, but you know, you can go kind of piggyback off of that skill set next door.
So you're being mentored by Tony, maybe informally, maybe formally in your mind. Will you have the chance to give back to other companies when you are in a larger space with other companies?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to do that. You know, I've been doing this for, you know, kind of, I guess, really growing the business for the past 5 years under Tony, and a lot of what he has added to me is just, you know, either introducing me to customers or, you know, telling me things that are possible that, you know, in the government contracting world that I wouldn't know are possible unless, you know, basically piggybacking off, you know, I think 20 years of over 20 years of his experience of doing that. So extremely helpful, and, you know, have had the opportunity to help other businesses that are kind of in a position I was 7 or 8 years ago, and, you know, say this is how you write proposals, and this is how you turn them into programs, and eventually this is how you turn them into a product that you know, take and go deploy or deliver to the customer or put into space or whatever.
What will you get out of being in a larger space with other companies around you? Sort of what's the potential of being in the Samtech Center?
So first of all, Samtech allows us to stay in Sahuarita. You know, we're at the point where basically busting at the seams. I'm hiring 3 more people in the next couple months, and I'm probably going to have to put them in the hallway. So if it wasn't for the Samtech Center coming online, I only want to move one time. I don't want to have to, you know, relocate maybe to Tucson and then relocate, you know, here in a number of years. So this gives us the opportunity to stay in Sahuarita versus looking at a strategic move, which may be up to Tucson or it may be closer to my customers on the other side of the country. So it really enables us to stay here. It will give us, you know, since we do optics, you know, the opportunity to have more advanced manufacturing facilities, room for clean room facilities, and just a more space for better high tech, you know, kind of manufacturing type facilities. So it's just what we do.
Their companies, Hydronalics and Control Vision, will move into the new Sahuarita Advanced Manufacturing and Technology Center once it's built. That's up to the town of Sahuarita, which is putting more than $1 million to go with $3 million in federal funding. I asked the town's Economic Development Director, Victor Gonzalez, why this project was needed.
We began about 15 months ago working on this project. We understood at the time that we needed to diversify the economy locally there in Sahuarita. We are very dependent on the mining industry, which is a big industry in southern Arizona, but more so in Sahuarita with our proximity. Many of the residents are employed by the mining industry. So when Freeport-McMoRan experienced and the overall mining industry experienced a downfall at the end of 2015, early 2016, we began to look at what would be some federal programs that will provide us some of the resources to advance our economic development initiative. And so we began to have discussions with Economic Development Administration, which is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, as to the programming that they have available to communities that are affected by shifts in industry.
And so the town is putting in about $1 million, and then the federal government is putting in $3 million, is that right?
Correct. The total grant award is for $3 million. Our match contribution for that is about 1.5 when you include the cost of land. And so the overall project cost is about 4.5. for this, which will result in about a 32,000 square foot manufacturing technology center.
And where is it going, and how many people can be working in that center?
Sure. So the location, so the project will be located on the southwest corner of La Cañada and Sahuarita Road, so along Interstate 19, off the Sahuarita Road exit to the west side of Interstate 19. So it'll be about, again, a 32,000 square foot facility. We're projecting that as many as 70 jobs will be created as a result of the companies that will move into the facility. We anticipate, well, I should say we know of 2 companies, Hydroanalytics and Control Vision, that will locate in the facility. And depending on how the facility is subdivided, we could have an additional 2 more companies located in the facility. So overall, we anticipate 70 new jobs to be created out of that facility, and as many as 4 companies residing within this complex.
We heard from those 2 companies, and they're excited to be able to co-locate with some other technology companies. What are you doing to try to attract those other 2 that could join them in the center?
We're working closely with the 2 existing companies on their supplier network. There's some projections that they've shared with us, and suppliers that could stand to benefit to being in close proximity to their facility or to their operations. We're also looking at other companies, none specifically, but companies that fit a similar profile to Hydroanalytics and Control Vision. These companies are fairly small in terms of employment levels, but they're what I consider a high value. They're companies that are beyond startup. They are in their growth phase and have multiple revenue streams and technology platforms. In the case of both Hydroanalytics and Control Vision, not only do they have technology that is applicable to Department of Defense and other federal agencies, but they also have a commercial application. And having those kind of companies makes a lot of sense because they're not subject to the windfalls of the federal agency or with the market, commercial market. So we're looking at those type of companies that fit the profile of small, high value, focus on R&D, focusing on engineering, assembly, where their sales are predominantly international and are not dependent on one sole source for revenue.
So this is one step on a path to diversifying the town's economy.
Correct.
What else is in your plans for the future?
Well, this is an important step and the first step for us. Part of this project, or I should say where the project's going to sit on, it sits on a larger master plan area that calls out a business park in the future. So of the roughly 3.76 acres the project will sit on, the larger area is closer to 16 acres. So there's ample room for a phase 2 or a phase 3. And so we're hopeful that this first project begins to anchor other similar technology manufacturing centers that could be built in and around this facility. Right after this project is completed, we'll start to anticipate what we can do as a town to develop the infrastructure or the amenities that could bring in that private investment and build on to this first initial project.
As federal efforts contribute to growth in Sahuarita, they're shrinking for another business development organization in Tucson. Startup Tucson was getting federal money for a program to help entrepreneurs grow their small businesses. Zach Ziegler has that story.
We got all our little asterisks.
Brian Cornelius was among the first people accepted into Startup Tucson's Thrive Scale-Up program. He and others in the inaugural cohort started in the spring of 2015. He says the past 2 years have been good for his company, R-Bar Energy, which makes minimal ingredient energy bars.
We have 9 employees now. I believe we might have had 4. It was probably 3. And we've just grown the team. We've grown what we do. We've shipped many more bars.
The bars are also heading out to locations across the U.S., airports on the East Coast, convenience stores in the Chicago area, grocery store chains all over the Southwest.
We went and pitched to Walmart recently. The growth trend is pretty phenomenal. Whether you're pitching to a buyer or whether you're pitching to an investor, you gotta have fun with it. And that's actually one of the things that original team at Thrive really taught.
Cornelius was among 12 entrepreneurs in that first class. All were able to attend for free because the program was paid for by a U.S. Small Business Administration grant.
It was to be funded under the Scale Up America initiative, which was designed to help identify local businesses that had the potential to scale and provide them with the resources that they needed to be able to create increasing numbers of jobs in the local community.
Startup Tucson received about $300,000 each year to pay for the program. The grant was renewable on an annual basis for 5 years, but after 3 years, the SBA canceled the grant due to a funding cut. 75 entrepreneurs went through Thrive Scale Up before it lost funding.
We've generated, just in the first 2 of the 3 years, about $6 million in revenue and about 70 jobs that were created over that time.
For Cornelius, the help was learning in which direction to focus his efforts.
I like to always believe that it's all in the execution. But if you don't have the tools to execute properly, you're going to go executing off over here and over there before you start going that way.
It was also his first chance to, as he puts it, work on his company and not in his company.
You're in it all day long. Anybody who owns a small business knows this. It's all day long and all night long, and weekends. This was the first time where I could actually take a step back, ask people who knew more about how to run a business and raise capital and scale.
Startup Tucson will still offer the same 11-week course it has offered in the past, but it will now have to charge participants. The nonprofit will step up fundraising efforts with the hopes of offering scholarships for those who can't afford the tuition. It will also offer shorter classes that focus on specific problems that confront business owners.
And it allows us the flexibility to work with each entrepreneur at the stage that they're at in cohorts of other entrepreneurs at similar stages.
Ultimately, Williams says, if Startup Tucson can't handle the change, it's not practicing what it preaches.
In the world that we live in today, change is happening at an extraordinary rate, and part of our mission is to help build a culture that's responsive to that change. And so our organization lives by its own values. We will not survive if we don't, just like any business. So we're very committed to our own philosophy.
A philosophy to grow Tucson's entrepreneurship community, and with it, the local economy.
A new technology and manufacturing business center in Sahuarita, shrinking options for startups training in Tucson. What's the big picture? For that, we turn to the Tech Park's Bruce Wright for analysis. What's the impact of Sahuarita adding a high-tech and manufacturing center? What impact does that have on the tech parks? Do you consider it competition?
I don't. I think this is a very positive development for the region. My congratulations to Mayor Murphy and to Victor Gonzalez, the Economic Development Director in Sahuarita. This really broadens the opportunity for us to both grow and attract technology companies into the region. Tucson's a big area, and I think there's room for innovation place up in Oro Valley or downtown development or the tech parks or what Sahuarita's doing. So I think there's a really good step forward, and it's going to provide space and infrastructure and support for a cluster of companies that are starting to grow up in Sahuarita.
So will you approach this with a different focus? Will each site try to attract different kinds of businesses, or how will that work?
Well, locational decisions are really unique to each company. They make decisions for a variety of different reasons. It may be because the CEO lives in Sahuarita, or that's where they find their employee base, or there are special facilities or amenities that they want with that particular location. At the Tech Park, we're not about real estate. We're about supporting technology companies, and we provide a whole array of services. But not every company wants to take advantage of those services, or they may find the need that they want to be downtown or closer to main campus. So the more variety, the more options we have for companies, particularly those we're attracting to the region, the more success we're going to have of bringing new employment into the region.
So did you yourself personally have a role in helping Sahuarita get to this point?
Well, I've served on a couple advisory committees with Sahuarita on their planning committee and economic development committee, so I was very aware of their grant application and very supportive of it. And again, it's a big win for the region.
Let's move on to the Startup Tucson story that we touched on a little bit ago. And again, take a regional approach. What will it mean for the region if their program that helps small businesses grow into medium-sized businesses no longer has that funding?
Well, first of all, Tucson's made great progress over the last 4 or 5 years of building up the startup ecosystem to support emerging and startup companies. And Startup Tucson's been an important part of that. And at the heart of that program was the Thrive program, which received federal funding. So it's a blow in that respect. I'm very confident that Justin Williams, the director of Startup Tucson, will go out and find additional revenue and funding sources for that program. But it's very important that we keep that program intact. Now, we have pulled together a really exciting coalition of all the groups in Tucson that do business development assistance called the Tucson Innovation Partnership. And includes Startup Tucson, Tech Launch Arizona at the University, the Tech Park, and the Arizona Center for Innovation, Pima Community College's Small Business Development Center, the Tucson and Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, and the Tucson Urban League. And ironically, we just submitted a grant proposal to the U.S. Department of Commerce to fund that program and doing a better job of coordinating and aligning our business support services for companies, emerging and startup companies. So we'll take Justin under our wing and help him make sure that Thrive is still there, and hopefully we can find some new funding for that program.
And have you heard back on that grant application?
No, we just submitted it a month ago. The competition is going to be fierce. We think we have a really outstanding proposal. And at the heart of that is trying to provide coordinated services to businesses that need business assistance support and an electronic portal so it's easy for them to get into the system and for us to all evaluate what their needs are and then try to support them. And clearly, Startup Tucson is a very important part of that.
That sounds like almost a bigger network than Startup Tucson may have had on its own, a bigger web for people to reach out to.
It is, and it's regional because we want to include being able to distribute these business assistance programs to Sahuarita or Sierra Vista, Oro Valley, Marana, not just Tucson. And I think we have limited resources, so we're going to do a better job making sure we don't duplicate services, we better align the service delivery. But again, Startup Tucson is a critical part of that because they really focus on the really early stage startups. The Arizona Center for Innovation, which is the incubator that we run through Tech Parks, is more focused on mid-stage and late-stage startups.
So you're trying to find areas to help at each stage of business growth and development.
And not just for startup companies, because we're really looking at fast growth companies that already are started but are looking to expand their market or to bring new products to market. And that's a large part of what we focus on at the Tech Parks.
We've touched on federal funding a little bit. The Tech and Manufacturing Center in Sahuarita is getting $3 million in federal funding. Startup Tucson is losing its federal funding. Tech Parks has applied for a federal grant. How big is the federal funding picture in Tucson for economic development?
Well, it's important in the sense that when we have new innovative programs, those funds can be the kickstart to those programs. Ultimately, we have to find sustainable funding for them beyond the federal grant. And that's always a challenge for us. But without those funds, we wouldn't be able to pursue some of these new initiatives, like the ones I've talked about this morning.
And give me the broad picture for the region on, I mean, we've touched on a few little pieces of economic development, but how is the region faring in its goals in economic development at this point in time?
Well, the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen steady growth in employment, but it's been modest. The concern I have is that we're falling behind Maricopa County in our job growth. The cities up in the Valley of the Sun are doing a better job for us. So I think I'm optimistic, but I think it requires us to do some new things. I think we need, like this innovation partnership, we need to do some things to accelerate job growth in the region. And we're doing a number of things. We started a program called Global Advantage to try to attract fast growth technology companies from around the world into the region. We've had success in bringing 5 companies in this year, but it's those kinds of efforts that I think are really important. I am asking my colleagues in the economic development community to come together to do a better job of branding Tucson. Visit Tucson does a fabulous job for tourism, but we're not seen around the world as being a leading edge 21st century technology center, and I think we need to go out and tell that story better. So I'm hoping that we can develop some common message points, share data, and even some images of Tucson so we can position ourselves to be more successful in this regard.
If you do all of that correctly, successfully, how far out from here would you start to see those signs of success, especially in terms of job growth?
You know, I think we're starting to see some of them now, but it's going to take, a year or two to really get us out there in a way that I think we're successful. And of course, if we get these grants, that will certainly help accelerate the process.
That's it for us. Next week, we'll hear from city council candidates who are on the August primary election ballot. Thanks for watching.